Hello, this is Chris Reed from MorningStar Ministries, and I'm coming to you with this special broadcast because I really felt led of the Lord to kind of begin to show the backstory and the background for the prophecies I gave for 2023. And I released these prophecies, of course, at our Vision Conference on December 29th, 2022. And we're already beginning to see some of these things come to pass as I speak. But I wanted to show you, because I think many people are interested in learning the prophetic process, and I want to show you that the vast majority of the things I prophesied on December 29th, 2022, I didn't just get those recently. I prayed the last 3 months of the year, but much of the inspiration for the release of those prophetic words at that time were a result of things that I received 3 and 4 years ago. Okay, I want you to get that. You're going to see this. I'm going to show you the time-stamped, documented time of when I started receiving revelation for many of the things, most of the things I ended up prophesying at the end of 2022 for the 2023 year. That, of course, we're not putting an exact time limit on, that it has to happen from January to December, but, you know, at least that many of these things will begin to happen, you know, be set in motion to happen. And then some of these things will unfold over a period of years. But I just wanted you to see how that I did not prophesy these things just at the end of 2022. I got many of these things years before, and it just was a slow build. And I would get a little piece here and a little piece there that you're going to see the evidence of, and how I felt the release at the end of 22 to release these prophecies. And by the way, many of the things that you're going to hear me read to you and show you as you watch this, I prophesied these things also when I pastored in Indiana. You know, I came here to MorningStar in July of 2021, but I pastored 12 years prior to that in Indiana. And in Indiana, when I was getting these things in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, that contained much of the things I prophesied at the end of 2022, I shared these things when I pastored in Indiana. So let's take a look and let's see how far back these go and why I felt it was okay this year to release them again, as you'll see the foundation for these are actually rooted in years gone by. If you have Apple products, you know how it works. On the Note app, when you make a note, at the top of the screen, it will show the date and time you put the note in. As long as you make no changes in that note, no dictation changes, then that note, the time, the date, will stay exactly the date that you first put the information in. And this is universally known. Everybody knows this is how this works. One of the things I prophesied for 2023 was I saw death in the royal family, specifically Prince Andrew, King Charles's brother, that he would have a mental health crisis that would be an accumulation of his legal problems, the connections and accusations with the Jeffrey Epstein situation, and the death of his mother, which just happened recently, and how that these things would have their effect on him. But I want to show you this, November the 20th, 2019, so over 3 years ago, quote, I wrote this down. I saw death sweep over the royal family. Another mystery will perplex the world. A prince shall suddenly pass, and the whole world will wonder in amazement. Prince Andrew will pass through death's door, and a region of the UK will face reform. Now, I released that this year, but you see when I received it the first time. But I believe it was the death of his mother that ultimately, adding those other things with that, is what will be the thing that will lead him to a mental health crisis. And so please pray for him. We don't want to see anybody die. We don't wish harm or death on anyone. But there was another prophecy that I received that you'll see in a second that makes me hopeful that we can pray and change this outcome. And I'll show you in just a minute another time-stamped prophecy. But I believe there are some events that we receive, that we can get by revelation, and they are set in stone, they can't be changed. I think there are others that prayer and human response can change the outcome or lessen the effects of it. For instance, in the New Testament after the cross, we see Agabus prophesying about a worldwide famine. And when he prophesied this international word, the church responded with disaster relief and helped those whom they could. And then I think another example, of when Agabus, a New Testament prophet in the book of Acts, he gave a prophecy, but this time it wasn't about world events. It was a personal prophecy. He told Paul that if he went to Jerusalem, he would be arrested. Remember, and Agabus took Paul's belt, I think, and bound it around his hands. Well, Paul went anyways because he believed God told him to go there, and God did reveal to him he was to go to Jerusalem and then ultimately stand before Caesar. So I think some things can be changed through prayer, some things can't. All right? So I'm going to bring up this first. Now this is a screen recording from a note that you're going to see. The date for this is actually January the 3rd, 2019. So we're talking 4 years ago. This is a note from 4 years ago. And you're going to see that many of the things in this note are things that were directly things I prophesied for 2023. But I had received them in prophetic encounters back 4 years ago. So check this out. The first one on the list, I said, I saw a crisis at the Mexico-American border that would escalate. And remember, I said in this year's prophecies, a trigger point, a tipping point that would cause a public outcry for bipartisan, results to address the open border crisis at the southern border. Because I said for 2023, mass illegal immigration was going to be seen worldwide. Well, here you have 4 years ago, I'm saying this, quote, once again, quote, my crisis at the Mexico-American border will escalate as new policies will be passed by the House and Senate to bring reform. Also, the U.S. government will work with Mexican authorities to bring great defeat to many drug cartels. The DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, will work with Mexico to accomplish this, unquote. One of the prophecies I gave this year for 2023 was about the border crisis at the southern border, and something would trigger, something would be found out. The American people would find out what the open borders, what our government was allowing to come into the nation, and it would cause such an outcry that the public would demand the government to address it. Something sinister was being allowed to happen across that southern border, something being brought through. We know human trafficking and fentanyl and different things are being trafficked across the southern border, brought across the southern border. But how that drug cartels would suffer defeat because of the U.S. and Mexico government working together. Well, right now, here in January of 2023, as I give you this broadcast, the drug cartels in Mexico are making headlines. And I think this is all setting up for that whole thing I prophesied for this year in 2023 of something coming across the southern border that when it's found out, the public will cry foul and demand change because of these open borders. So here we see drug cartels being involved in a prophecy 4 years ago connected with the southern border. The next thing I said was another major Hollywood star will die at the hands of the drug epidemic. Well, that turned out to be more than one, okay? Here's another one. Now, many people wondered, when I prophesied at the end of 2022 about the naval conflict in the South China Sea. That was not a new prophecy. I got this 4 years ago. Here it is, quote, conflict between nations in South China Sea and Panama Canal will happen there. Pray for the U.S. Navy and for a peaceful resolve, unquote. That was 4 years ago, and I prophesied that this year and gave a lot of prophetic words about China and Taiwan and things that we would see that would happen, there in the South China Sea and this growing conflict between China and Taiwan and the internal revolution within China. Okay, here is another prophecy from 4 years ago in January of 2019. On this same note, quote, I saw the death of a prince in the royal family in the United Kingdom. His life will be celebrated in peace, and the near death of another prince whose life will be spared, and he will be thankful. So this first prince, I believe without a doubt, was Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, who died in April of 2021, so 2 years later. And his life was celebrated in peace. But this other prince, it says, quote, near death of another prince whose life will be spared and he will be thankful, unquote. I also believe this, in this encounter, is talking about Prince Andrew. And this is why I believe that we can pray and it can change things. It can change the result of whether or not he takes his life or whether prayer can be made and he can find the Lord and his life be spared. But he would have a near-death experience and would be spared. So I think the Lord's showing two possible outcomes there, and prayer can avert prophetic judgment. Just like a prophetic judgment was given to Nineveh, destruction was coming to Nineveh, but Jonah was called to go to preach to Nineveh repentance. And after 3 days in the belly of the fish, he gets his act together. He goes and preaches, and for that time, God spares Nineveh. So this shows how biblically events can be altered or delayed or lessened, through prayer of God's people. The next thing you see there on this note, Japan and Indonesia must watch themselves from a tsunami in the Pacific. The Philippines will shake with a 7.0 earthquake. Now check the next one here. And these things did happen, by the way. Now, I think that you're going to find this to be interesting. Here it is. The Vatican, will experience even further scandals that lead to great reform in the Catholic Church, and it will lead to major resignations as Italy suffers great economic distress and riots in the streets, unquote. That was 4 years ago. And if you'll remember, for 2023, one of the things I prophesied was that in Italy, there would be opposition against the new conservative Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. I think I said her name right. I'm sorry if I didn't. But she would face great opposition. And here's another example of how the drug cartels would be caught because there'd be a coordination with governments, and how the Italian banks, I said, would catch these drug cartels working in Italy. And I said that the Vatican would somehow be connected. A lower level person, a priest or something, or maybe a higher level person, I don't know. But it would be somehow connected to the Vatican, whether they knew or not. And it would be brought to light. And so I connected the Vatican to Italy having riots in the streets and an economic situation. That's what I saw 4 years ago. Now we know in part, we prophesy in part, as Paul says. Sometimes we receive part of a future event, and then we'll get another part later, and then we'll know in our spirits when it's time to release it. And I share these things. I have close confidants. When I feel like I have a prophetic word that I'm ready to release, there are a few handful of people that I share this with and talk through and see if it agrees with their spirit. And I release it because I believe I'm supposed to release it, because I believe that when true prophecy is released, it releases activity in the earth that can actually bring those things to come to pass. That's what my belief is on that. And that was, as you see, January 3rd, 2019. So 4 years ago, I was talking about an economic situation in Italy that would involve the Vatican, all in one paragraph, all in one encounter. So the next one that I will go to is this one, this prophecy. This is also one of those that is a screen recording from a note that the last change made on the note was December 31, 2019. So 3 years ago. So the last one we talked about was 4 years ago. This one is 3 years ago. Okay? And I want to share with you what it says. So 3 years ago, the Lord showed me this. Quote, riots in China will escalate as the desire for freedom there increases. This was the basis for my prophetic word on October the 1st, 2022, where I saw an internal revolution happening in China that would ultimately culminate with the end of Xi Jinping's downfall and the loss of power of the Communist Party. And I think that won't all happen in 1 year, but I think the beginning of those things are already happening, because I prophesied this, riots in China will escalate as desire for freedom there increases, 3 years ago on December 31st, 2019. But then fast forward to October the 1st, 2022, I gave the prophecy about the internal revolution with riots in China, and then it began to happen. Many of you have followed this. November the 24th, 2022, in China, people were being welded shut in their homes, in their residences, and this one building caught on fire. It killed people, and we saw something we hadn't seen there in decades, and that was people rioting in the streets. This made international news, and it actually caused the Communist Party to back down and relieve some of the COVID policies. Listen, folks, this is why this is going to keep going. Once the Communist Party loses that much control and the world finds out about it and it gets on the media, that's a bell you can't unring. The cat's out of the bag. Once people find out in China they can riot and it bring about change in the government, they'll keep doing it until ultimately they will have a revolution there. And I believe God will bring democracy to China. Now, this won't all happen in a year, I don't believe, but over the next several years, we'll see China, I believe, take on some form of democracy as the Communist Party loses power. But here we see 3 years ago, I was prophesying about these riots in China that would be a result of freedom. The next thing I said, Brexit will be completed as Boris Johnson claims victory. That turned out to happen. Next one, a close ally of Donald Trump will betray him and the public will learn. It will shock and then embolden Trump. Well, you know, John Bolton betrayed Trump. Many in Trump's inner circle, that was one of the weaknesses of his administration. He brought in people close to him that ended up kind of turning against him. Many people feel Mike Pence betrayed him on January 6, 2021. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying there were a lot of different people that was in Trump's inner circle that people felt that betrayed him, and that did happen. The next thing from 3 years ago, quote, as 2020 progresses, you will see the Dow fluctuate, but we will see 30,000 on the Dow Jones. Well, I'm writing this all down 3 months before COVID hits or thereabouts. And the Dow certainly fluctuated, as you remember, in 2020. But before the end of the year, it had rebounded and got back up to 30,000, which was incredible. Okay? The next thing, I said, quote, the trade war with China will reach a boiling point of frustration. Riots hit the streets over frustration, unquote. Well, that was 3 years ago. And certainly I have believed that one of the reasons why COVID was released, I believe, by the Communist Party of the Chinese government, I believe they released it intentionally, COVID, because they wanted to keep people indoors. They didn't just want to hurt Donald Trump, even though they wanted to, because the trade tariffs he put on China was crushing China, okay? But also, I believe the revolution was stirring even then, and if COVID was released, it would keep people from rioting in the streets by forcing them to stay indoors. And I think that's why you're seeing this thing with Taiwan also go on right now. I think that is a distraction. They are saber rattling and threatening Taiwan, which I think there will be something happen there, and you'll see even years ago the Lord was showing me this would happen. The next thing on this, 7.1 earthquake to hit Indonesia, 7.2 to hit Japan. Here's another one I saw. Quote, significant power disruptions across the American power grid, unquote. Now that was 3 years ago, and it's interesting, just a few days ago, all flights in the U.S. were grounded because of affecting of technology. They're still not really sure what's happened. But I think that we're going to see the power grid affected by some cosmic event that will happen this year that's directly tied to this prophecy from 3 years ago. Now look at the next one here. Check this out. Many people that think that, that we just prophesied, the internal revolution starting in China and Iran was just something that I prophesied at the end of 2022, but it wasn't. Listen to this. Riots, quote, this is 3 years ago, riots in Iran will escalate as economic frustrations mount and a revolution there happens. Guys, that's incredible. I hope that you see the significance of this. Let me read it again. Quote, riots in Iran as economic frustrations mount and a revolution, begins. So, Iranian revolution, I was predicting 3 years ago to happen, because you'll see there at the top, December 31st, 2019. Now, some of these other prophecies that I gave, check this out. This is June 26, 2021. We've documented these already, but things that came to pass that I prophesied well ahead of time. June 26, 2021 at 10:26 a.m., hurricane to hit West Florida. Now, that was Hurricane Ian that happened in October of 2022 that hit Florida. And on June 2nd of that same year, I had a division a second time. I called it St. Petersburg Area Hurricane Vision. You'll see it there, June 2nd, 2021 at 6:44 p.m. I saw a significant hurricane hit St. Petersburg, Florida area, also endangered Tampa and Clearwater, praying for those affected ahead of time and that a fresh move of God hits the area. It's coming. Well, that was in June of 2021. A year and about 4 months later, a once in a 100-year hurricane hit the west coast of Florida. Yeah, hurricanes hit Florida all the time, but not like this. Not this level of hurricane and not this size of a hurricane and that particular side of Florida. It had been over 100 years since Tampa had been hit, and they didn't get the brunt of it because people knew about this prophecy that I released. We began to pray, and it hit a little bit south of Tampa in a less populated area where less people would be hit, potentially being killed. So obviously we hate that it happened at all, but it's another example of how we can pray and things can be averted. But if people remember when they were tracking that Hurricane Ian, Category 4 or Category 5, I can't remember whichever one, it was headed right for Tampa Bay, right? Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area there. And then at the last minute, it went a little bit south. Here's another prophecy that I gave. August 18th, 2022. A tragedy will befall the Pelosi family that will catch the world's eye, unquote. And then I said we need to pray for Nancy's children regardless of how much we disagree with her views. That was August 18th, 2022. This happened, I believe, at the end of October. So over 2 months later, it was all over the news, something terrible that happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband at their home in San Francisco, and someone broke in the house. And I pray for his recovery. I don't think we know the full story of what happened there, but it's sad. But this was foreseen over 2 months ahead of time. Now, here is a few more. Here's another one from June 26, 2021. All right. Prophecies future. I saw Sarah Sanders will be the governor of Arkansas. That became true a year and a half later, as she just recently, I believe in January of this year, 2023, became the governor of Arkansas. So that was a year and a half before that. I saw that. Also, this is June 26, 2021. I saw 1976 high inflation, crippled and confused. Well, that's exactly what's going on right now. It's very much like the Jimmy Carter administration from the 70s. Then I saw another worldwide pandemic in the mid-2020s. And look at the last one, an explosion in New York. One of the things I prophesied this year was I saw some kind of building crumbling, okay, and a shaking in New York. And I don't know if, I'm not saying it's a terrorist attack, it very well may be, but I saw some kind of explosion or some kind of crumbling of a building. So it's either a terrorist attack or a weather phenomenon that caused a loud explosion sound, and this crumbling of this building happened that I believe is for New York. Now this was prophesied in June of 2021. Another one, March 11th of 2022, I was predicting then, as you'll see on this one, that Vladimir Putin would die. Putin will fail. The mission will in Ukraine from Russia will end. As I heard in December 2021, watch Poland. Now fast forwarding down to the bottom. This will ultimately end in Putin's death. He will become isolated like Hitler was. Okay, this was literally days after the Ukraine-Russian war started. So I predicted Vladimir Putin's death the first time in February of 2022, right when the war started. And then the last note that I had written it down, as you see there, the timestamp at the top, March 11th. Also, this is another one that I saw. I'll share this one with you. I predicted this over a year ago in January 2022. Joe Biden will not finish his first term due to health issues. January 13th, 2022, you see it there at the top. Rise of women in political leadership across the world. And so you will see that is exactly what we are beginning to see with Giorgia Meloni in Italy. I think we've seen it also in the UK and Hungary and other places. And so I wanted to share some of these things with you because many of these prophecies that I gave this year about China, about Putin, about Iranian Revolution, about Prince Andrew, about riots and drug cartels in Italy and Italy's economy and the Vatican. Some of these things were rooted in things I got 3 and 4 years ago. So they're not just recent things exclusively that I got. I had a reoccurring experience which led me to want to share these prophecies with you, to show you the historical documentation of how these prophecies began. I would also like to show you one last thing that I think is worth pointing out. On August 8th, 2020, I had a vision where I said this. You'll see it there. This is from my Facebook page, screenshotted August 8th, 2020. Please take this seriously. We need to pray for the safety, protection, and well-being of President Donald Trump in the next bit of short time. We cancel any enemy plans against him in Jesus' name. We declare the enemy will not have a shot or chance at his life. Will not have a shot or chance at his life. We must pray for all leaders. That was on a Saturday evening, August 8th, 2020, when I prophesied this. 2 days later, on August the 10th, 2020, you can still look this up. It was when on August 10th, 2020, President Trump was giving a speech in the White House press briefing room, and someone was shooting right outside the window there of the White House press briefing room, and President Trump was speaking live on TV in the White House press briefing room, and the Secret Service came in and rushed him out. Okay? And that made news. I mean, the Washington Times recorded it. The Drudge Report, Secret Service pulls Trump out of press conference at White House. The Drudge Report on August 10th said, quote, Secret Service ends Trump's press conference, doors locked, shots near the White House. You know, and some of these things ultimately led to working with intelligence. And obviously we are wanting to preserve the safety of our nation and our leaders. And another one that I'll share with you, this is the last one, you'll see it there in December 12th of 2019, I'm sharing a post or resharing a post from February 19th of 2019. And this is when I prophesied almost a year before Boris Johnson became the Prime Minister that he would become the Prime Minister and that Brexit would happen. February 19th, 2019, you can see the time there of the post. God says, I will shine bright in the coming days in the Brexit plan, and those who say it won't happen are wrong. It will. It is and will happen. This will happen to show my power in the UK, just like I did in the US. That the establishment doesn't have the final say, I do, and none can stay my hand. Boris Johnson, you have gained the confidence of the British people. You've been chosen to shine in the leadership in the UK. Don't forget the one who chose you. No, it won't be the Parliament who did the choosing. It is Almighty God. You have always stood out in every crowd. Even your appearance speaks to your uniqueness to which you were created. So February 19th of 2019, I prophesied Boris Johnson to become the British Prime Minister, and then ultimately him to lead the nation out of the European Union. Okay? And so I, once again, am saying that this is another example where God allowed me to see another leader of another nation emerging on the scene, and that Brexit would happen. And one of the things I prophesied this year is that because of the mass illegal immigration that I was seeing 3 and 4 years ago, many nations of the earth would begin to develop a patriotism, a love of country, protection of borders. Even Acts chapter 17 in your Bible says that God sets the boundaries or the borders of nations and determines where men should dwell. So this is why patriotism will develop in many nations, because borders of nations will become disrespected as we see this mass illegal immigration happening all over the world, from South and Central America up into the U.S. and even in Africa up into European nations. And it will cause violent acts. It will cause tragedies to happen and nations to deal with internal terrorism, which we're praying against and we do not ever want to happen. So I'm sharing all of these things with you to show you why I prophesied many of the things I prophesied this year. One of the things I prophesied that was new was I asked people to pray against the health crisis for Ted Cruz, okay? That it would affect a decision he would have to make. But many of the other prophecies that I gave this year were actually rooted in encounters that I can show began to happen, and I was getting pieces of them back 3 and 4 years ago, and then the Lord gives more gradually. And then we show documentation of actually when these things come to pass. And it's not to glorify me, it's to say, it's like when Jesus said, when you see these things begin to come to pass, it's worth noting. So I pray this has blessed you today. I appreciate so much the kind words. Anytime you step out and prophesy like this, major events, there's always going to be critics. I don't even answer that. I just refuse to participate in that because we have to share what God is giving us. And when we can show the things we're sharing, we were receiving a long time ago, it really begins to show God is speaking and He knows the time and when the time is right to release that word in its fullness when you get all the parts together. So I thank you for watching this today, and I pray that you feel the heart in which I've presented this is to glorify the Lord Jesus Christ and to show He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He still shows men and women future events so that we'll know how to pray and we'll know how to prepare. God bless you. Thank you so much for watching me today, and I pray you'll share this with others. And until I see you again, this is Chris Reed coming to you from MorningStar. God bless you.